Hello, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 7 of Radical Embodiment, the podcast. Today I'm bringing you Kavita J Patel. Kavita is one of the most sought-after, world-renowned relationship coaches for women who are professional, high-achieving, successful, and single. For more than a decade, she has supported thousands of clients in helping them find what she calls their soul-level love. I am particularly excited to bring Kavita today and share her rich wisdom and depth with you. I worked for Kavita as a coach in her program for about a year and a half, so I know her work intimately, deeply, and it's incredible, deeply transformative, and almost feels like a necessity. One thing I wanted to share, this is from Kavita from her website, to put some context before we dive into the interview. So she says, contrary to the way most of us relate to love here in the West, meaning it exists outside of us, in Eastern philosophy, love resides within you. If you are living and breathing, you are a soul. The soul is divine and has all the light, knowledge, power, and love that can fulfill you in ways that are currently unimaginable. We are all on a journey to peel away the layers of what is keeping us from being able to access this part of us. She says she's on the same journey with you, and she believes with all her heart that you deserve and can have extraordinary love. She calls this kind of love soul level love. So let's dive into the conversation. Hi, everyone. Here I am with Kavita J Patel. Kavita, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. So happy to have this conversation with you. Yeah.
Me too. I'm excited to get to hear your wisdom in this realm. So I've been starting these conversations with the question of what, because I find that this is in regards to the just embodiment as a new term that seems to be everywhere. It's not new, but it's all of a sudden it's like everywhere. And so I'm always curious, everyone's unique take to embodiment. So I'd love to hear for you, what does embodiment mean to you?
Yeah. So what it means to me, and you might hear my son in the background, just so you know.
Perfect.
But what it means to me is that, right? No, it's basically when we can really feel like inside of ourselves a shift of some sort, right? Like it's not just something that we're managing in our minds. There's so much in self-development that I feel like, mind hack it, and then you're really managing yourself from your mind. Like, oh, I should put up a boundary here, or I should do this, or I saw that I did that. Maybe I should try this thing. And you're like managing yourself. And to me, embodiment really just means that you can fully drop in to yourself and excavate and uncover what it is that you want to say, what it is that is, your needs, but in a very vulnerable way, not just like needs in the way that many people are referring to needs. It's also being able to excavate feelings and being able to express all of that, so that you can just be with yourself and really navigate internally into spaces that are not easy often to navigate into, and then have realizations, sometimes not so easy ones, because we also, when we go inwards, have to look at some darkness that sits inside of us too. But to be able to look at that, feel it, allow it, understand it, decode it, right? This is why it's so important to have support and coaches.
Yeah.
Decode it, and then be able to like exist in the world in that state, right? And the state can be ever evolving, but it's like you're sitting in a new way of being. You're not managing it through your mind.
I like that. I like that distinction a lot. And I think it's an important distinction to make, especially if you are in like the personal development growth world and you're not managing it. Instead, I like the excavating and expressing. And you mentioned, I'm curious, have you go a little deeper of what specifically you mean by this, like expressing the vulnerable needs versus people think needs, but they're not really going vulnerable. So what, yeah.
Yeah. Like, an example would just be like, maybe I'll just use a really basic example, but like okay, for example, like in my marriage, at times I just feel like, okay, I just want to be appreciated, right? Like that's a big thing for women in general in
Yeah.
marriage and in partnership. And so it's like, okay, you can just say, like, oh, I really would love it if you appreciated me for these things. Like how I'm mother, or how I show you love through cooking, or like, how I just show up in the world in my work, just like appreciate, right? So that could be a need that you have. And you could say that to a partner, to somebody, and say, like, this is the need that I have. Now, the thing is that it can feel vulnerable to just even express that need, especially if it's hard to even say what it is that you want, right? So for so many of us, it's really hard to even say, I want this thing. I have this desire, for fear of judgment, for fear of rejection, for fear of not getting it, for fear of getting backlash, right? It can be all different things that you've experienced from your past, and most likely in your childhood, that is causing that fear to come up for you, that then blocks that desire from being expressed, or that want or that need. But so it's vulnerable to even be able to express it, but it's not true vulnerability. So true vulnerability is when you actually, and I'll give you an example in just a second, but it's really like when you go inside of yourself and express a truth that sits inside of you without adjusting it or changing it because of what you fear outside of you. So, who you're talking to, what they're thinking, what they're saying, like you're adjusting none of it. It's just your own truth that's coming out into the open. And it's not coming from a place of blaming another. So I'll give you an example of what I mean.
Yeah.
So, and when you're at this level of vulnerability, the way that you know that you're at this level of vulnerability is that nothing in the space, like there, you won't get defensiveness, you won't get backlash, you won't get judgment. It actually transcends that response in another, because you're coming into the space with so much like vulnerability and love encapsulated within it, that it actually just paves a path to understanding and love. Now, what comes out of that understanding and love can be many different things, like, sometimes people can get very vulnerable, and what comes out of that is a breakup, or somebody can get very vulnerable, and what comes out of that is like reconciling things or falling deeper in love, right? So we don't know what way it's going to go, but it creates a path to love and understanding, so that more truth can get unveiled within a relationship in particular, so that you get clarity. So what I mean is, like, instead of saying like, okay, I just want to be appreciated, it's kind of like, if I were just to close my eyes for a moment, it's just like sharing, like a lot of times I really just want to feel like I just really want to feel like the ways that I'm trying to express love, and the ways that I'm trying to show love are also being received and seen by you,
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like I'm trying to show this love and express it in these ways, and I'm not feeling that you're getting it or receiving it, or if it even matters to you.
Yeah. And that's so much more, that's so much more clear than just, I want to feel appreciated. And I think it's curious. It's curious and interesting too, how to even connect and tap into that. Everyone is different, but for you, what you did is you closed your eyes, and I could see you dropped down and in, which you went, to me, in my perspective, like an embodied state. You went within, to going back to your words, like the excavating, to be able to then express from there. Yeah. And it's beautiful. It's not easy to, I think often we adjust, you were mentioning, we often like adjust or modify what we're going to say based on how we are afraid, or how we perceive the other person might respond or react to us. I think a lot of that's happening unconsciously too.
1,000%. And it comes from like our upbringings, like it comes from a moment, and it just took a nanosecond for us to translate something when we were children, but it came from a moment where you wanted a hug from your mom, and instead she turned her back and catered to your sister,
Yeah.
instead. And, or a moment where your dad compares you to your brother, and then you feel like you should be something different, right? So there's a million different ways that we've translated things, but that's what's happening in those moments. It's like, okay, I want it to be self-expressed. And you had this moment when you were a child where you tried, and then you were told you're too sensitive, you're too much, or stop crying, stop being so emotional, all those things that we're told. And those are still generic, because everybody has like I always say this, a very distinct flavor of those generic, moments that we talk about in childhood. But like, you have your translation, and so you translated when you did express yourself and your mom said, stop being so sensitive, that like there was something wrong with that, right? And so now when you want to go express something that feels sensitive to you, you're afraid because you don't want to be told that you're too sensitive or that you're wrong.
I think that's it. Exactly. You already have this sense that you're wrong for feeling what you're believing is sensitive. There's this deep. And so is that, I'd love to from here dive into your work is really based a lot on like karmic patterns and supporting your clients and releasing karmic patterns. So I'd love for you to just like, what is a karmic pattern? Because I feel like that's what you're starting to introduce here. And like,
yeah, it's basically a pattern. And listen, I think there's a lot of misnomer and Western culture around what karma means. Karma is good and bad karma. That there's not just bad karma. Like everybody uses it as like, okay, they're gonna, karmic retribution. But there's also good karma. So, we can also really, the lives that we like, the way that we look,
I have a Boulder example of good karma. This is anyone who knows Boulder. This is like the most ridiculous example, but it's like funny. Boulder is run by dogs. Boulder loves dogs, and everyone's getting on about like, there's a lot of open space. Dogs are off leash, picking up poop. But one of my friends on social media, she was packing up her good karma by every time she's out on the trail, she brings a lot of extra poop bags and picks up all the dog poop that other people haven't picked up. So there's this silly good anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when you come into karma, inherently means that you don't have to believe in previous lives. You get to believe whatever you believe, It just kind of alludes to that, because you're bringing into this life a specific, like, why do I look like this? Why was I born to the parents that I was born to? Why do I have these specific genes versus my sister or brother have other genes? It just kind of answers some of those questions. And so good karma does look like you coming into this world, and, you see those like child prodigies, and they're just like, rattling off the periodic table, and they're like 4, you know what I mean? Like they come into this life with this intelligence. That's good karma, So anyhow, I'm going a little bit off track, but I just like to kind of.
That's helpful to define. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I'm talking about karmic patterns within relationship, I am talking about it from a place of, what have we brought into this life? What have we translated through our family systems, through our parents, through our siblings, through when we were younger, that we're unconscious of right now? And how is that impacting or blocking us in love right now, right? So how is that keeping us from really having what we deeply desire in partnership or getting into a relationship? And so we all, no matter who you are as a human being, we all have karmic patterns. Nobody is without. Now, your level or desire for moving through them to have depth and intimacy within relating and connection is what determines kind of like how much you go there or don't go there, but we all have karmic patterns that are really keeping us from experiencing extraordinary connection and love, like that that spiritual being of one with everyone around you.
Mm.
What brings you away from that are your karmic patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for identifying that. And even as you're talking, I mean, I think a lot about just our relationship specific to our own body and relationship to ourself. And I feel like it totally seems like it applies here too, of karmic patterns or stories that were created when you were a little kid based on how your parents related or responded to you. And something I love about your work, Kavita, is this isn't blaming our parents. This isn't making our parents wrong, right? They're humans doing the best that they knew that to do. And of course that had impact on us, good, bad, in between. But I also actually see a lot of that keeping us from not only really having true loving partnerships, relationships outside of partnership, family, friends, but also from really being able to love our own relationship with our body, our own relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's rampant, right? Like all that needs to be said is like a mother saying to a daughter, like, oh, I was actually this is a great example. I was talking to a friend the other day, and, she was just sharing how her and her sister don't get along. And I, it's just my natural way of being to poke and ask lots of questions and be curious. So I said, oh, well, like, why is that? What do you think that is? And she actually went pretty deep quickly. And she just said, like, yeah, there's this one memory that my sister has told me about recently. And, they were both sleeping in the car. So the parents thought, and she has an older sister. So the person I'm talking to she's an older sister, and then her younger sister, they're not getting along. So they're both sleeping. The mom says, thinking that they're sleeping, oh, isn't, I'm going to change their name for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't Katie prettier than Laura? And she heard it, right?
Wow.
And so literally, like, that's what her younger sister has been carrying around. Like, I'm less than, she has all this, like, she wants to prove, like she wants to prove that she looks good because she's been constantly compared to her older sister, who is seen as prettier than her by her parents, So yeah, that's absolutely what gets into our subconscious and then plays out over and over again.
And so then once you become aware of that, or, and of course we all have more than one karmic pattern, there's myriad, but that's a great example. Once you become aware of that, what might you suggest somebody do with that awareness?
Yeah, I mean, it stays as pain until we actually address it, right? And then we don't even know, like, we just keep masking the pain, right? And I know this. Yeah. We mask it either by dieting, we mask it by shaming our own bodies inside of ourselves, right? We mask it with constant comparison, right? We mask it with drugs. We mask it with,
numbing, social media scrolling, mindless.
Yeah, numbing out. Totally. Yeah. There's so many ways to mask it, right? Some people mask it with shopping, right? Like just wanting to feel powerful through what they wear and spending a lot of money, in fact, around that, and feeling valued because of that. So anyhow, point being is that we mask it. But if we actually face it, and, what I say is, when you can go to the root of where something originated, which is, again, we're not blaming our parents. It's like that mom, if she knew what it was going to do to her child, would not have said that if she actually knew what that was going to do. She just said it because she's completely unaware and probably has her own stuff around her own beauty and, with her own mother, and it's, passed down from generation to generation. And then she says it because she's completely unaware. But if she did know, she probably wouldn't have ever said it. So it's more like being able to heal that. And so when we can heal that from where it started, and I often say, even if you've lost a parent, or you were raised by step parents or grandparents, this is all still applicable, even if you have siblings, but it's through a healing conversation with that parent. or step parent or whatever. And I know that freaks most people completely out because there's all of this thought like,
I've
oh,
done it, and it's terrifying and
yeah,
incredible at the same time.
yes, it's terrifying and incredible is right.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's terrifying because we have like, my mom's not capable of meeting me. She's emotionally, unevolved. She doesn't even hug me. You don't really know my parents, Kavita. Like I get that all the time. And yet it actually doesn't matter what your parent is. It's just really about you healing this for yourself. And there are lots of layers, as I know, to these healing conversations. It's like I could go on and on about it, but the point is that when you can, and there's a specific way to have a healing conversation. It's not just like, hey mom, you said this thing a long time ago and it really hurt me. I think I need a sorry. I need you to apologize. That's not going to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's like a specific way, but it's through a really healing conversation where you're dropping into that vulnerable space, that embodied space, actually. Then having the conversation so that your mom can actually deliver the thing that you've always yearned to hear and want and have felt, like you are beautiful exactly as you are. And I was wrong to say that, and, you're just, you're exquisite. And you were from the moment you were born, So like, that's what we want to hear, that we're special for who we are. And so then when we get it from where it didn't come from at the beginning, it's not just a healing of yourself, it's a karmic healing. So it's ancestral healing. It's future healing, like what you won't then pass down to your own children, right? So it's so much bigger than that moment, because when you heal it with your parents, you came into this world through them for a reason. And if you just keep a distance or disconnection in those relationships, and you can feel close. Like, people will say to me, like, I have a close relationship with my parents. It's like, great, and I'm like, good. That still doesn't mean that you don't have pain from them. You do.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's actually acknowledging that and healing it, so that you're free, they're also free, like your mom's freed. And, if you choose to have kids, or if you have kids, they're freed.
Yeah. Thanks for taking us through that. And I mean, it feels like what you shared at the beginning, even like what embodiment means to you, and this idea, the distinction you made between this managing place versus that excavating and expressing. And even it feels like, okay, this example you gave of your friend, right? And she had heard, like, her and her sister have always fought all their life, not gotten along, from this little blip, but significant conversation. And so in order to help heal it, transcend it, is to have this healing conversation that's not staying at the surface or even like the next layer under the surface. It's actually going to the root. And for me, it would even be like, where is that sensation from when that moment happened in your body? Connect to that. What does it feel like? Communicating from there to help release it, move beyond it. And yeah.
Totally. I totally agree with that. Yep.
Yeah. But so it feels in line with, what just shared, what embodiment means, because it's not trying to manage the pain. It's not trying to manage also the conversation. It's, there's a very different energy. And I think the energy too, that you'd receive in healing it is more of, you can put this in your words, but to me, it'd be like, it's like a system healing. I mean, you said like releasing karmic patterns, but it feels different than just like, oh, okay, that was nice. Like, that was helpful. I shared this with my ex, or I told him I was angry with him.
Yeah. It's totally another level. And I know you could speak to that, having done some of these conversations for yourself before, but it's like, people will say to me, like, can I just write a letter? And I'm like, you can, and I'm sure you'll feel a little bit better after that letter, and it'll feel good. But will it last? Will it break the cycles that you're in? Will it actually tangibly change your life and how you show up? No.
Yeah. 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 So I'd love to hear what you have to say on what does releasing these karmic patterns and like having these healing conversations with our parents, with other loved ones. What does that have to do with anything with us being able to embrace our bodies?
Yeah, I think it has so much to do with it. I mean, when you can look in the mirror and say to yourself, like, I feel beautiful for yourself, what a gift. Like, what a
Yeah.
gift to just feel that level of freedom in
Mm.
just knowing that you feel beautiful for exactly who you are. And, we in our families, there's just so much around, of course, how you look, how you fit into society, and what like parents are totally wired and their parents were wired. And if you're a parent, you're wired to protect,
Mhm.
and to help your children belong. I mean, my son, I remember he's born with a birthmark, and he's got a birthmark right here on his face.
Mhm.
And I remember for the first time he's born, he's in my arms and looking and being like, what's on his face? And then being told like it's a birthmark, and
Mhm.
immediately having my own reaction to
Mm.
that, like, is he going to be made fun of? Like, it's literally like, how is he going to fit into the world? And then, of course, given what I do and my own work, like that faded fast, right? Like
Yeah.
really fast. But that was the immediate reaction because I
Mhm.
want him to feel safe in the world. Like
Mhm.
that's my instinctual parent space, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's also coming from whatever I think beauty is or isn't, given what I grew up about what beauty is or isn't, like what my dad would say about beauty, what would my mom say about beauty,
Totally
and
right.
so, or our bodies. And I'm using beauty as I know they're
Yeah.
different, but what they would say about my body and what it was like. And, and there's a whole dynamic even with like mothers and daughters, because it's like, if the mother is holding on to like, she married her husband is a little bit bigger, but she grew up with like a father that was all about staying in shape,
Mhm.
and she's kind of taken that on. And the husband isn't really all about that because opposites attract. And then the daughter is more on his side in terms of
Mm.
DNA. And then she sees that and it triggers her. And then she has a response to that because she wants her daughter to fit into the world.
Yeah.
And now all of this is getting passed down. Do you see?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's so nuanced, and also like 100% of how we view our bodies comes from what's been passed down to us or what we've experienced.
Completely. Completely. Yeah. And I think this speaks to, I won't go a whole lot, but I wrote the book Radical Embodiment. I've obviously had my own journey around body image and body acceptance. And of course, I've done a lot of inquiry, reflection, and work around that. That is the center of my work. And yet I've had this curious notion of like, but still, like, why was that so strong for me? And I put it together literally after the book came out. And my mom and I did have a conversation with it, but it was an energetic thing that I took on. So what it was like, it was slippery in the regards of it wasn't ever anything said, but her parents, so speaking of karmic patterns, ancestral patterning, her were severely critical of her weight and her body. And I, from in utero, which might sound wild to people, and I'm not going to go into all of that story right at this moment, but played emotional caretaker role for my mom. And so energetically, I think to emotionally caretake, I took on her insecurity.
Yeah.
So
That's
it can, I mean,
absolutely
it's
right.
right. It wasn't even happening from like a verbal, yes, of course there was societal conditionings. Of course there was, people had said stuff at different points in my life. But I think the main part that I finally put together, it was an energetic thing that I took on.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly what I mean, is that
Yeah.
her parents are critical of her because they
Yeah.
want her to fit in.
Yes.
specific way. And so she's carrying all this shame, and then
Yes.
absolutely can get passed down without even saying a word.
Yes.
And just, it's just taken in through energy.
Yeah. 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 So, I'd love to have you share if you see a connection. Since we're talking about embodiment, you specifically work with supporting people in experiencing soul level love, which maybe we should define what soul level love is first before I ask you this question.
Soul level love is really feeling like you are connecting to another on like the physical realm, the emotional realm, the intellectual realm, and the spiritual realm. And sometimes people can be like, well, that's like a tall order, you know? And I'm not saying like they all happen simultaneously, constantly, right? That's
Yeah.
not what I'm saying. And what I'm also saying is that it's really our own ability to connect on all of those levels also, right? But it's a love that you create with another that chooses you and you choose them, where you want this deep level of connection and intimacy, where it's like, you know, truth be told, we can marry anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You marry anybody, but if you truly want a partnership where you're not settling on any level, where
Yeah.
many people are without even knowing it, and
Mm.
then realizing it and waking up to it, you know, later
Mm.
on. But this is like, how do you really from this place within you of repatterning things, releasing these karmic patterns, open up to these levels of connection that are possible and create that with another. So
Yeah.
that's really soul level love. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So it actually, I think I'm glad you shared what that means first, because in my head, I see that and feel the connection. But what would you say around the connection between the more embodied you are and the more you are open to experiencing more love and even the potential of experiencing soul level love?
Yeah, I think like it's all about embodiment. You know, I say this all the time. It's like, okay, everybody knows, generally speaking, that relating is all about communicating, you know?
Yeah.
And so people will be like, okay, what do I say? You know, tell me what to say. Or they'll go to therapy and they're told, like, use we, not I, and like these little hacks, you know? But the truth is that communication, the words that you use mean nothing without the energy from which you use them. So
Mm-hmm.
I can say I love you and not really have an energy of love behind it, and it will actually fall flat on the other person. Or I could say I love you with a lot of energy around it, and it's received by another person, you know?
Yeah.
And so it has nothing to do with what you're saying. It's about what the energy from which you are saying it that really creates connection or disconnection, you know?
Mm.
And so when you're in an embodied state, you're actually in tune with your energy. You're in
Mm-hmm.
tune with your own intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And and again, like I want to say this is not perfect, right? Sometimes it's like you are totally unembodied and you say like a horrible, mean thing to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing, and then later on realize and come into that embodied state, and then clear it up, you know, or clean it up if you want to call it that, right? But so it's not like, you know, I really believe like to be in this state constantly is an enlightened state, which nobody
Yeah.
is, you know.
Yeah. We're living
But
a human existence.
exactly, but we're
Yeah.
cultivating it. We're cultivating it
Yes.
and really allowing ourselves to feel the power of our own energy and how we can wield it for good and for connection, you know? So does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Yeah. Yeah, I think what I would like to just expand upon and say, how you've said it doesn't have to be perfect, or sometimes you might say something really unintentionally hurtful, right? And none of us are 100% in our bodies all the time. I think that would be like an enlightened state, right? We're cultivating the capacity to be with ourselves and be with our full spectrum of our feeling, more and more. That's what I see this work as. And we're human. So I think
Yeah.
being gentle with yourself and acknowledging that's important. So I'm glad that you just said that. I think that's really, yeah,
Yeah.
important.
It's so important because like, and then, in traditional Eastern philosophy, like an enlightened state is actually a transcendence of everything, mind and body, but yes, we're in this human existence and we are, feeling lots of things constantly, and to be in touch with that and to know what that means and code it in a way that supports your life and what you choose next is like powerful.
It is. It is. And sometimes it's too much, depending on the degree of trauma, right? Depending on your degree of current resource. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you, because a lot of this too is, speaking of that discomfort, like is deeply uncomfortable. Do you have any like I don't like the word hacks. So, but do you have any like, I don't know why, I just am like, just don't like that word, but do you have any tips, suggestions, in regards to if somebody's listening to this and is curious and is like diving deeper and this has triggered a feeling sensation, they're like, oh, I want to talk to so-and-so, but it's like really hard for me to actually even let myself feel that discomfort and go there. What would you suggest that they, I mean, I feel obviously like get some support, get some help. Other than that, are there any suggestions that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it is like, I think meditation is a huge form of embodiment, Um, but what I would say is if you can sit with yourself in a meditative state, right? No like music, okay? Like meditation in its original format is not with music.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm just saying so that but music can help you drop into feelings, which is powerful. So but like just silence, because then you can kind of let yourself go in without having to conjure something because of what's happening externally. So what I mean by this is like you go in and you consciously say to yourself, okay, if I were to let go of what another thinks, another feels, what's happening in the world, how it's happening in the world, how I'm responding to the world. So you're literally saying to yourself, I'm letting the external go for a moment, just for a moment, I'm letting that go, and all of my energy that's getting expended outwards, right? Because all of our senses, the only sense that you can actually close are your eyes to go in. Every other sense is out.
Yeah.
So it's like you're taking in a lot all the time as human beings. So when you close your eyes, you're also doing that. You're saying, I'm taking a moment to go in, and closing one sense so that not everything is external. So you're just saying to yourself, okay, if I let go of what's happening in the world, what's happening with a friend, what's happening with my parents, what's happening with my work, what's happening with my health, what's happening with my pet, like let it all go. And then just say, what's happening with me? What am I feeling right in this moment? What is uncomfortable for me in this moment? What is joyful for me in this moment? And giving yourself even just 2 minutes, 3 minutes to go in and be with you, and sit with you for just a couple of minutes and tune in, and just even that is so impactful.
I love that. I love that. And I love those questions that you shared. Those are like so significant and it is impactful, right? Sometimes I think we can feel overwhelmed of like, or it's like, oh, I'm supposed to sit for 30 minutes or it's to be this big thing, or I don't have the time. It's amazing. It like continues to amazing what profound insight you can receive in just 2, 3, 5 minutes. And I think I really believe it's a beautiful way to acknowledge your own personal worthiness, to actually let go of all of that other stuff and go within and what is it that is really happening with me. Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful. So to kind of start to summarize and bring things together, I like to end with, I've been asking everyone on my podcast thus far this question of your number one main takeaway that everyone should know or practice or do if they want to live a more radically embodied life.
Yeah, I just think it's like, one of my biggest things is, how are you expressing yourself? Like what is your truest expression in the world? And it's a big question, to be honest. It's not like a small one.
Mm-hmm.
But to just even start in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
to just even be like, what are the ways that I don't fully express myself? What are the ways that I do not allow every part of me to the surface in a conversation with a friend, on a date, in my partnership, even at work? Like, what ways do I hold back in some way to just because it's uncomfortable for me, and just to start there and to look at it, because it's amazing. It's so scary, scary to face some of the stuff. But it's amazing when you actually just bring more of yourself to the table. Like, the response is can be polarizing, right? Like, it can be absolutely polarizing, but it's like you're going to draw in people into your life that are just like there, with you. And it'll just show you're so not alone in this.
Yes.
Time, And so you draw in those people, and then you also get very clear on the people that don't resonate on that level with you. It doesn't make them wrong or bad. It's just their own journey with their own life, with their own things. And you can let that go, But when we hold back on all fronts, it can be very isolating,
Totally.
and separating. And so to just start to even look at that is a good
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Kavita, thank you so much. I think this was like such a rich conversation, and I just appreciate the depth that you bring to your work, to your life, to your relationships. Yeah, it means a lot. How can people, if they'd like to find out more about your work, your offerings, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, so you can just go to Kavita J, don't forget the J, Patel, PATEL.com. And right on the front, there's like a free 4-video series that I've done. And it talks all about like karmic patterns, how to identify them for yourself, and how it's impacting you in relating, in love. And so you can they're free. They're 4 videos. They're amazing.
Awesome.
And so you can just sign up right there at KavitaJPatel.com.
Awesome. And that'll be linked in the show notes so everyone can easily find that. Yeah, definitely check out the videos. Like, what a good offering and way to like get the next layer of depth into your world and your work.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure. Thanks everyone for tuning in and listening. And yeah, I hope everybody really takes on that, what Kavita suggested for like to live a more radically embodied life, just looking at where maybe you're not expressing and where you could express yourself a little bit more, starting there. Awesome. Take care, everyone.